Hello everyone. Do you remember when you took a history course in high school? You got to memorize so many details, and maybe some of you came to hate history because of that. If that was the case with you, that's really a shame. History, in fact, is not about memorizing details. It's a very important and useful subject to our lives. These days, the world seems to become more and more uncertain. Who would have thought that an event like Russian invasion of Ukraine could happen in the 21st century? Now that's causing us a series of problems such as energy shortages and accelerated inflation. You may be wondering where we are going, worrying about the future with things developing this way. To survive in an uncertain world, indeed, history plays a very important role as a compass. Today, I would like all of us together to feel this power of history. So let's begin now. First, let's think about the significance of history. Here's a dot. This describes us without history. We have no idea where we came from and where we are going. But with history, we have trajectories we can examine. It may be like this or like this. Once we have this, like Newton's law of inertia, based on where we are from, we can get some idea where we may be heading. If we have been following the blue line, probably we will be heading in the direction of a blue arrow. If red, then the red arrow. If the direction we are heading in is not favorable to us, what can we do? We don't want to go in this direction. Instead, can we go in that direction? In the field of physics, if we want to change the direction of a moving object, we will apply some force so that the direction will change in our favor. Applying this to history, if a historical trajectory suggests that we are heading in a wrong direction, we can apply some force in order to change it. It will be great if it worked. But if not, what went wrong? Too much force applied? Wrong angle? In these attempts, history is once again helpful. We can find the efforts made by people years and centuries ago. Some worked, some didn't. We can follow their successful examples. We can examine their failures, try to find out why they failed, and try something different based on our observations. Like this, history is very important to our future. But wait! Physics and history are two totally different fields. So it is absurd to apply physical principles to history. But there is actually a historian who adopted this method. That's Giambattista Vico. He analyzed 7 ancient civilizations and concluded that there is a cycle in history. This diagram shows it. History starts with barbarism. This is what we may call the state of nature. We may also call it the survival of the fittest. From there emerges civilization. The first is the age of gods. There, society is ruled by religious leaders. Next comes the age of heroes. There, society is ruled by military leaders. Finally comes the age of man, where people rule their society. After that, society goes back to barbarism. So, in his model, it is not a straight line, but a circle. This may be true in the ancient civilizations, but does it apply to Western history? Let's examine it together. The study of Western history in high school usually starts with ancient Greece and Rome. The cycles of these two civilizations have been studied by Vico. So here we will start our examination with the transition in ancient Greece from Age of Man to barbarism, which is indicated in orange in the diagram here. The transition of ancient Athens from Age of Heroes, or the rule by aristocrats, to the Age of Man, or democracy, was marked by the reforms of Draco in 621 BC and Solon in 594 BC, and the reform of Cleisthenes in 508 BC is believed to have established democracy. Athens reached its peak during the age of Pericles in the first half of the 5th century BC. And there, Athens adopted an imperial policy. Under Pericles, Athens expanded its imperial ambition. Because Athens' naval expansion increased the number of oarsmen, their political voice had to be heard. So democracy expanded. But around this time, demagogue politicians started to appear. They did not have any long-term or coherent policies. Their main concern was to obtain and retain power. Toward this goal, they promised anything to please people. People supported war because victory brought more slaves, helping them become richer. As a result, Athens' imperial policy went unchecked. In 431 BC, the Peloponnesian War broke out and Athens was defeated. Demagogue politics eliminated those who opposed to the tendency, such as Socrates. In the end, it was incorporated under the hegemony of Macedonia, led by Alexander the Great in the mid-4th century BC, and then under the Roman Republic. In this way, democracy in ancient Greece was destroyed by an outside force. Ancient Rome also underwent the transition and established the Roman Republic. But in the end, it also lost order and the Civil War era started in 133 BC. In order to regain political stability, the Republic designated Caesar as a lifetime dictator. He was assassinated, but his adopted son, Octavius, seized power, ending the Republic. So in this case, the Republic was collapsed within itself. The empire flourished for a while, but it once again became ungovernable in the 3rd century. In the end, it reverted to barbarism called Dark Ages. Now, let's move on and examine from the rise of the Age of Gods through the transition to the Age of Heroes. Here, we need to look at the developmental process of Christianity. Christianity came into existence as a reaction to corrupted Judaism. Christians were persecuted in the Roman Empire. The persecution began in 64 in Nero's reign. Its degree and frequency varied depending on the time and place, but it lasted for several hundred years. When the political situation in Rome worsened to the point of near anarchy, Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in 313. Maybe it's because the unity and monotheism of Christianity served his purpose to reunite the fragmented empire. Then it continued to develop, and in the 6th century, Rome established a superior position in the Catholic Church. It further developed, and Pope supremacy peaked during the reign of Pope Innocent III in the 13th century. Here, let's look at the relation between emperor, who was a ruler in the secular realm, and Pope, who was a ruler in the spiritual realm. Initially, there was a symbiotic relationship between the two, because Pope needed protection and Emperor wanted legitimacy to be the true emperor among many contenders by acquiring the recognition by Pope. In 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charles the Great as the West Roman Emperor. However, their relationship gradually became more competing over power. According to this diagram, Pope enjoyed his superior position between the humiliation at Canossa in 1077, in which an emperor was excommunicated by Gregory VII, and the outrage of Anagni in 1303, in which a pope died in the fight with French King Philip IV. Between 1096 and 1270, under the papal leadership, they conducted crusades. However, the empire gradually declined, and new challenges for the secular power emerged. They became centralized states. These are the political units that exist today, such as Great Britain, France, and Spain. They had different centralization processes, but let's not get into them today. These states succeeded in further concentration of power, transforming themselves from feudal estates to centralized states. Later, they established standing armies and achieved the rule through coercion. They fought one another too. the 100 Years' War between England and France, the Wars of the Roses, and the Italian War as some examples. At the same time, they took over from empire the confrontation with Pope. England established its own Anglican Church, trying to gain independence from the Roman Catholic Church. While secular power was dispersed, spiritual authority was also divided. It was the Reformation, which resulted in forming the two churches, Catholic and Protestants. In this way, in medieval Europe, divided secular and spiritual authorities coexisted, causing severe political disorder. The 30 Years' War broke out against these backgrounds. It started as a religious war, but during the battles, its nature changed. When the war ended with the Peace of Westphalia in 1630, Europe had been transformed into modern society, in which nation-states populated international society. Spiritual authorities had lost prominence and would become politically less influential. This marked the beginning of the Age of Heroes. Now we are here. So let's look at the transition from the Age of Heroes to the Age of Man. Here we call it the process of democratization. In centralized states, there was a power struggle between king and aristocracy, which was the source of military officers. There, in the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution started, producing new social classes which based their lives on economic activities. They were capitalists and labor. Capitalists contended with the military class over political power in order to establish the environment friendly to economic activities. In this aspect, their interest matched with that of labor. However, they had conflicts over the distribution of economic profits. On the other hand, the competing military classes had common interests to protect the old political system against the rising economic classes. So these four social groups, king, aristocracy, capitalists, and labor, competed and cooperated among one another, with political influence gradually transferred from the military classes to the economic classes. Democratization in modern Western society represents this process. There were great varieties in this transition. Some states achieved democracy relatively peacefully, and others didn't. England is an example of peaceful transition. It was an advanced nation of the time. There, the transition took place one at a time, taking a long time. First, the power balance between the king and the aristocracy was decided way before the Industrial Revolution. Before the Glorious Revolution in 1688, King James tried to establish absolutism, but the attempt failed. As a result, The next rulers, William and Mary, accepted the Bill of Rights 1689, which limited the power of monarch and set out the rights of Parliament. Then came the Industrial Revolution in the mid-17th century, and the capitalist class emerged. The power balance between the old ruling class and capitalists was determined within Parliament by the two major political parties, the Tory, who supported the old class, and the Whig, who called for the expansion of civil liberty and was supported by capitalists and merchants. Around the 1830s, England entered a period of confrontation between capitalists and labor. But during the Chartist movement of the 1830s, labor did not radicalize sufficiently to demand the abolition of private property rights. So political power of labor was increased in the form of the expansion of suffrage within Parliament. On the other hand, there were some countries which became extreme expansionists during this process. Germany would be a typical example. A united Germany was formed in 1871. At that time, the power balance between Kaiser and the aristocracy was not settled at all. Then, in order to catch up with England, the German states rapidly proceeded with industrialization during the 1840s and 50s. So soon after Germany was united, all four social groups were present in domestic society. The Kaiser was the sovereign, and the aristocracy and the capitalist interests were represented in the Reichstag. Aristocrats, who had a strong tie to military, and capitalists tried to accelerate industrialization through military buildup. So the nation started a rapid naval expansion. But this caused a severe friction with British interests. Its rapid industrialization also caused international economic order to deteriorate in the 1870s. These developments would eventually lead to World War I. After its defeat, Germany once again became radical expansionists. The Kaiser was gone as a result of the defeat. The military was on the verge of extinction during the revolution in 1918. The SPD, representing capitalists, became the ruling party at the Reichstag. This social group was facing a severe threat from radical labor, which opened its own revolutionary congress. Facing the imminent threat of labor aggression, capitalists made a deal with the military. The military offered protection to capitalists from the labor threat. That way, the military secured political influence. Germany had been suffering hyperinflation during the 1920s, and the Great Depression in 1929 hit very hard. The economic social groups were in disarray. Against this backdrop, an expansionist coalition formed around the National Socialist Party with all segments of society participating. The The army supported Hitler's rearmament policy. He also eradicated his own paramilitary group, SA, to secure the independence of the army. The army, in return, did not block Hitler's rise. During the early period of the National Socialist history, capitalists funded the party, responding to its slogan, "If the National Socialist Party collapses, there will be another 10 million communists in Germany." In October 1930, when a wave of strikes spread in Germany, Hitler supported the strike, explaining to the employers that condemning the strike would let their working members go over to socialism. In the election of March 1933, Hitler's party obtained the most seats in Congress. In this way, democratization does not necessarily come with military conflicts, but there is also a realistic risk. In fact, in addition to Germany, Italy, which conducted the state formation and industrialization during the same period, became an expansionist. Japan, which had been undergoing a similar process to Europe until the Edo period, joined international society under a similar condition to Germany and Italy, also became an expansionist. Together, they formed the Axis power in World War II. In this way, as far as I am concerned, Vico's historical cycle can be applied to Western history. What do you guys think? Of course, it may be my demanded eyes that see this cycle. So other people definitely should examine the process too. We will end our first part of examination here. In part 2, supposing this cycle exists, let's look at what contributions it can make to our modern society.